repeating everything that I've already told you about my friend and colleague.
Obviously, Captain America was a virgin.
Look out! Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Marvel She-Hulk Episode 1 video. There were all kinds of Easter eggs and references to a bunch of different things, including all the way back to the Incredible Hulk with Edward Norton. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, I'll be doing videos for all the episodes. Be sure to subscribe to get them. We're also doing a giveaway for Disney Plus memberships. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and just post your favorite Easter egg or moment from the episode on the video. Careful for spoilers from the episode. If you haven't seen it yet, we'll just start at the beginning and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs and WTF moments as we go along. Speaking of WTF moments, they dropped an F-bomb in the post-credit scene. I think that's one of the first times, not the first time, but one of the first times that they dropped it in a Marvel production, particularly a Marvel series. Deadpool 3 will be the exception to that because it'll be rated R, but also connection to She-Hulk because Deadpool, like She-Hulk, breaks the fourth wall. She did a number of times in this episode. But the funny thing is that She-Hulk actually broke the fourth wall in the comics many, many years before Deadpool ever did. So technically, Deadpool is copying her, so can't wait for them to meet in Avengers 5, Kang Dynasty, and to joke about that together, breaking the fourth wall again. The episode title was A Normal Amount of Rage, a reference to their relative rage levels as they Hulk out, but also she literally says those words in the episode during their training montage. She has a normal amount of rage. They actually started off with the newest Marvel intro, adding Jane Foster Thor to it, Miss Marvel and Moon Knight, Doctor Strange 2 footage as well. They do that in each new Marvel series or Marvel movie where they'll add little bits from the previous Marvel production to the title. In all the promos, they also have a green version of the Marvel Studios logo. We'll see if that eventually shows up in an episode. The funny way they start the opening scene is making you think that she's breaking the fourth wall, just kind of setting you up for the idea that she will continue to break the fourth wall many times, but she's not actually breaking the fourth wall in this opening moment here. She's just talking to people who are behind the camera. For big comic book fans, a lot of her speech sounds a little bit like a Who Watches the Watchmen kind of speech, and a lot of her speech also mirrors the speech that the Hulk gave her about her responsibility. Like, people in power have a responsibility to protect people without power. She name drops having a savage look, which is a reference to her becoming Savage She-Hulk like she does in the comics. Like, that's literally the name of one of her titles, Savage She-Hulk. There are a couple references later in the episode where she talks about not thinking that she has an alter ego. Like, I don't think I have one, but that's just foreshadowing because she definitely has an alter ego. We just haven't met her yet. For most part, in Marvel Comics history, She-Hulk is depicted the way that you see her in the courtroom here. Like, she's like a green lawyer that represents superheroes, but for the most time, she exists kind of like in a Professor Banner Smart Hulk kind of way. In some of the newer comics, they have depicted her in a more savage She-Hulk, like full Hulk kind of way. Like, she does have a full Hulk form. It looks way more muscular than this form. When she hulks out for the first time, like when they're doing the origin story, some of the scenes are built to look just like scenes from the 1970s Incredible Hulk series with the practical effects. One of the differences in the way that they actually do the effects for her Hulk and for Bruce Banner's Hulk, though, is that with the exception for like this one opening scene, Bruce Banner is mostly all motion capture. Like, anytime you see his version of the Hulk, he's always wearing the man-canceling suit with dots all over it. The different way that they pull off some of the effects for She-Hulk, though, is that they actually have like a super tall woman who's like an Olympic level shape walking around on set that they use as a body double reference. One of the downsides, though, is that because they don't have like an extra year to work on the special effects, is that you can kind of tell when they zoom in on their mouths, they don't quite nail down the motion, so it kind of hinders their performances a little bit, but for the most part, none of the special effects weaknesses really bothered me that much. When they name dropped the law firm GKL&H, that's the law firm that she works for in the comics. They're also the people that are representing the defendants in the trial that she's prosecuting at the end of the episode. This is the head of the law firm. He becomes so impressed with her performance during that court case that he eventually winds up hiring her. I believe a lot of that'll be covered in episode 2. Then she actually breaks the fourth wall for the first time to reveal that she's already become the Hulk, like, oh, surprise, we already had the origin story, and they flash back to show you how it all happened. So just to chart this in the timeline, they said that it doesn't take place that long after Avengers Endgame, like it takes place after the Shang-Chi post-credit scene. Wong is also going to cameo in the series as we've seen in all the trailers. He'll help chart the timeline a little bit too with some of his references. So I believe all the stuff you see with Wong in the trailers is meant to be before the events of Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness. So we're talking like the same year as Avengers Endgame happened, not that much time has gone by. When they're in the car, Bruce Banner talks about his arm healing on its own, but that's because of his gamma abilities. He has the suppressor that he built that keeps him in human form, but it doesn't completely negate all of his gamma powers, thus the arm slowly healing. Some of you may have figured out the Flamin' Hot Cheetos joke too. The whole thing with the Flamin' Hot Cheetos and the chopsticks is meant to be an Oscar Isaac joke in real life. Like it's something that Oscar Isaac did in real life, just eating Flamin' Hot Cheetos with chopsticks. Someone took a video and posted it, and it just blew up on social media. So there are a couple points in this episode where they call back to that, like later in the episode, you see them eating more Flamin' Hot Cheetos with chopsticks. Bruce Banner references another relative of theirs named Ched, who's also a genius. He might be the person in the post-credit scene with the ponytail, but it could be like a totally different character that we haven't met yet. He doesn't sound like he's from the comics, like there is no Ched that's related to Bruce Banner in the comics. They do the funny real-life theory about Steve Rogers being a virgin for over 100 years, till the end of Avengers Endgame when he went back in time to stay with that version of Peggy Carter. This is another example of Marvel doing real-life fan theories and making them canon in the series. They just did the same thing with Ant-Man legit canonizing the Thanos theory. Now, he made a joke about it, but them having the character talk about it in a Marvel production is them canonizing the theory to the MCU effectively.
Let me address the elephant in the room. I've heard a lot of chatter out there asking why I didn't shrink down, go in, and kill Thanos in a really creative way. First of all, gross. Secondly, it's much more complicated than that. Allow me to explain.
If only we had the time.
I cannot wait for like the next weird fan theory to pop up in the next couple of years and then work it into one of the other Marvel series. Like they're going to continue doing stuff like that. Then there's this whole teaser with one of the Grandmaster's ships from Skaar. It's the exact same type of ship the Grandmaster had. The Hulk later says that it was probably a messenger bringing some sort of message for them from Skaar, but he'll have to find out about it later. That's just a teaser for future episodes. Like, yeah, they'll pay that off in a future episode. I did a video a little while ago about the possibility of them doing more Planet Hulk and World War Hulk Easter eggs. Because later in the episode, he talks about being full Hulk, like kind of losing his mind and being in full Hulk form for over 2 years. The early theory is that during those 2 years when he was full Hulk, Banner doesn't remember the Hulk actually having a child with another woman from Skaar. And that'll be their way of doing a version of Skaar, son of Hulk, from the comics. But let me know in the comments what you think the message was that they were trying to bring to him from Skaar. Like what was so important that an alien ship would just show up on planet Earth to find the Hulk. Then they clarify how she gets contaminated with Hulk's blood, like how he's capable of bleeding. They both get cut in the accident, and Bruce Banner's wristband that was keeping him in human form gets disabled temporarily, allowing him to bleed and her to be infected with his gamma blood. And like I referenced the 1970s Incredible Hulk TV series with the practical Hulk effects, they kind of do a version of that when she hulks out for the first time and then stomps off into the woods. And I believe this is also the first time that we've seen Bruce Banner Hulk out practically with effects instead of then doing just full CG replacement. The whole scene of her coming to, stomping through the woods, finding the bar in the middle of nowhere feels like it's right out of an episode of the 1970s Incredible Hulk TV series. When she walks through the bar, there's a QR code on the right. The QR code actually leads you to a Savage She-Hulk comic book that you can get for free on the Marvel website. They did this Easter egg during all the Moon Knight episodes, or at least most of the Moon Knight episodes. There were always QR codes in the background that would just give you free comic books. There's a couple references on the chalkboard too, like there's a bunch of graffiti here. There's a Miss Marvel symbol, and there's the word green, just another reference to her becoming She-Hulk. She hulks out again, losing it on the dudes who won't stop coming at her, then passes out, waking up after the Hulk has taken her to his hideaway in Mexico. The way they explain this, Iron Man helped him build this place after the events of the first Avengers movie. It's sort of like their Science Bros place where they hung out, like it's meant to be a big Science Bros reference. Gave him all of his gear pretty much because the Hulk isn't rich or anything like that. He even jokes about that too, like Tony saying that he would come back and take it from him, like this is only on loan, I'm gonna come back for this someday. Which is also kind of meant to be sad, like he's remembering his friend and being sad that he's dead. But that's also the reason for the broken Ultron helmet in the house there. If you didn't spot it, that's not one of Iron Man's old armors. That's actually an old helmet that Ultron wore in one of his early forms, and Iron Man and Hulk put it there just as a reminder for their hubris, like the events of Avengers Age of Ultron basically happening because they were too reckless with their experiments on the Mind Stone. Also, the other reason for them putting this place in Mexico is because it's outside of U.S. jurisdiction, meaning that it's out of the jurisdiction of Thunderbolt Ross, or it was until the formation of the World Security Council. He also clarifies that this is the same lab that he referenced during Avengers Endgame that he spent during the blip trying to become Professor Hulk. And they finally answer how he was able to heal his arm. He basically says that the way that the Gamma reacts with She-Hulk's body is different from the way the Gamma acts on his body, and something about the way that it interacts with her allows him to use her DNA to basically heal his arm completely now. I think this is them just setting up that some of her powers will be a little bit different from his eventually. Like they're just building some room for that, like, oh, this is why she does things differently because the Gamma powers work a little bit differently on her. When he burns her blood samples, that's also a reference back to Incredible Hulk when Stan Lee had his cameo scene and hulked out himself because of the soda pop that had been contaminated with Hulk's blood. Also, the leader was stealing a lot of his blood, like he had samples of all the Hulk's blood, trying to recreate his powers, which is how he created the Abomination eventually, which they later reference. It's also the way that he became the leader as well. He was contaminated with Hulk's blood. A lot of people wondering when they're going to bring the leader back. They can still do that anytime they want. But obviously that's just meant to dovetail with the idea that Abomination is a big character during this series. Like one of the big trials that she has to do is representing him in court, trying to free him of his charges. When he references the multi-year journey that she's on, that's a reference to her entering the MCU just in general, like in eventually being in Avengers 5 Kang Dynasty and Avengers 6 Secret Wars in a couple years. We'll also probably wind up getting a She-Hulk Season 2. She references Pixar's Inside Out movie, just confirming that Pixar also exists in this universe. I think they may have referenced Pixar at least once before. We knew that Star Wars and Lucasfilm existed in the MCU, so I think Disney is also meant to exist too, but I can't remember the last time we saw a Disney reference. But obviously everybody knows that Disney owns Marvel and Star Wars in real life, like Disney owns all these properties. They also try to explain that she starts out just being the Professor Hulk balanced version of the character, being all chatty. But like I mentioned earlier, I think this is meant to be foreshadowing because she says, I think I don't have an alternate persona. I think that's just foreshadowing for her going full Hulk, becoming like a mindless version of the character in the future. If you haven't read a lot of the Hulk comics, like there are alternate personas of the She-Hulk. Like she has a gray form, just like the Hulk has a gray Joe Fix-It form. So based on their emotional state, just their psyche in general, they can take completely alternate personas. Because of when this takes place in the timeline, he says he was wrestling with an alter ego for 10 years. That's a reference to the events of the Incredible Hulk right after he became the Hulk for the first time. When he references Black Widow's lullaby, they've referenced that many times in Marvel movies, like it's kind of a joke now, most recently in Thor Ragnarok. I already mentioned the Planet Hulk references that he makes during this when he's talking about being blacked out, basically being full Hulk for over 2 years. I think that has more to do with the Skaar ship that showed up at the beginning of the episode. During their training montage, she says the title of the episode literally, she has a normal amount of rage. They make all the jokes about spandex, which they pay off in the post-credit scenes, like in the end credits when they're drawing them at the big bulk store, just buying a whole bunch of extra pants. They have the joke about Hulk throwing the boulder into outer space, just to remind you that he has the full strength of the Hulk in his Professor Hulk form, which is a little bit different from the comics. Like he's a little bit weaker when he's in the balanced state. Usually he's more powerful in full Hulk state. But I think what they're saying in the MCU is that as Professor Hulk, he still has access to 100% of his strength. It's just that during a lot of this, especially when they start fighting each other, he's holding back big time, which also I think is eventually going to get to some World War Hulk references because you do see a lot of She-Hulk versus Hulk during the episode. Like this is clearly foreshadowing the two of them going at each other in the future. Him pushing her off the cliff is also just to show you how she's now impervious to most physical damage. Like you can still hurt the Hulk, but it takes a lot of force. Their biggest weakness is mostly against psychological attacks like Professor X invading their mind. They have all the jokes about them getting drunk together, like they have to drink a giant dump truck full of liquor just to get a little buzzed. But he winds up making a bunch more Science Bros references to him and Iron Man just hanging out, getting all sad about him dying, saying that they spent a lot of time at this beach house and just hanging out, with apparently Iron Man getting super drunk, complaining about Captain America a whole lot. I think that's also a little bit of a wink at the Demon in a Bottle storyline, which they also kind of did a version of during Iron Man 2. You also notice that they carved their initials on the bar, which she also does later at the end of the episode. They continue the joke of Captain America being a virgin, her big theory, which they eventually do pay off in the post-credit scene. I'll talk about that in a second too, because that's another example of them canonizing a theory that just sounded really good. The only thing I found weird about this whole montage here, especially this funny moment, is the fact that she's still got a hangover. You would think that the Gamma powers would burn off the alcohol in their systems so fast that that wouldn't be a thing. We also find out that just because of the state that she's in right now, mentally, she can transform into Hulk and back into human form on command. But I think that's also kind of misleading too. I think eventually she will fully lose it and not be able to do that. Like, there are all these jokes at the end of the episode, too, where she's like, I will never, ever have to do this again. I can be Jennifer Walters. I will never need the She-Hulk powers ever again, which is just meant to be a joke that she will, like, literally have to Hulk out right after that. So anytime a character just keeps going on and on about how they're totally in control, it means they will probably not always be in control. When she references him quoting a comic book, though, who's going to protect the world if it isn't people like us, I think that's actually meant to be a quote from the classic Avengers comics. And it's more meant to foreshadow her future crossing over with the Avengers, but also be jokes about her being a lawyer as well. Like, she will be defending people just in court, but also eventually in the Avengers movies, like Avengers 5, she will literally be defending the Earth in a more traditional style. When she references Secret Government Contractor Squad, obviously that's meant to be an Avengers reference, but it's also a reference to the Sokovia Accords, because when they signed the Accords in Captain America Civil War, technically that made the Avengers agents of the World Security Council. But I think it's also meant to be a sly reference to Thunderbolts, who are literally on the government's payroll. Like during Falcon and Winter Soldier, when Val is explaining who she is, what she does, who she works for, she says that everything she's doing is sanctioned by the US government, even though it's meant to be super shady. And then they have their big Hulk versus She-Hulk fight scene where they just go at each other. Like I said, he's really holding back here, but like he shows her how to do a thunderclap, and she does her own version of that, disabling him with some sonic blasts. When she's hulking out here too, this is also a pose right out of the comics. She breaks the fourth wall again later when he finally agrees to let her go. Apparently his nickname for her is Fuzzball. I think maybe that's meant to be a reference to her curly hair. A lot of people wondering why it's straight when she becomes the Hulk. I think they just want her to look more like comic book She-Hulk when she is fully hulked out. And then it transitions back to present day with her breaking the fourth wall, telling us like, okay, finally I've explained everything to you. And then they set up the big joke with her saying that she's never going to have to be She-Hulk again. I'm never going to need to do any of this. I can totally be a normal person, right after which Titania busts through the courtroom where she has to Hulk out and stop her. When she says her name is Jennifer Walters, Attorney at Law, that's literally in the official title of the show, like She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. I believe the whole idea here, though, is that Titania wasn't coming for She-Hulk herself. It looked like she was coming for one of the defendants or the judge, because if you look later in the end credits scene, the drawings are based on courtroom drawings that you see them drawing at the beginning of the trial, like there's a person in each courtroom drawing the proceedings, but they're also animated in the style of She-Hulk comic book art. They're also meant to depict the events of that particular trial, so I think when we get to future episodes, in each episode, the end credits will change to just depict each trial that she's in during each particular episode. And in this one, you see her hold up an Avengers mug with lipstick on it. I think Titania busting through had something to do with the lipstick on the mug. If you're not a big comic book reader though, Titania is one of She-Hulk's biggest villains in the comics, but the way the actress said they're playing the character on the show is that she does have superpowers, like she is kind of a supervillain, but she's like the worst version of an influencer that you can imagine who winds up hating She-Hulk, and I think it has something to do with She-Hulk becoming so popular. Like someone recorded her big takedown in the trial and posted it on social media, so it made her, as Jennifer Walters, She-Hulk, super popular. So I think Titania wants revenge against her later in the episodes, and that just becomes a bigger and bigger thing. But she also talked about her character, Titania's character, eventually being on the Thunderbolts eventually, so they might do that too. You also notice one of the partners from GKLH, who's her boss in the trailers, sees what she's doing and is really impressed by her, but then when the actual end credits start, they depict her transformation into She-Hulk, and like I said, they depict the events of that particular trial. You see the recently broken wall in the background. You see your friend Nikki there. Her in the elevator as She-Hulk, I think, is also meant to be a reference to episode 2 stuff, where she joins the law firm GKL and H, who are representing the defendants, like the other person there who's her new boss was really impressed by her. We see Hulk bring her boxes and boxes of cheese puffs at this big bulk store while she's buying a bunch of new pants. Obviously, they'll give her a version of the comic book costume like you see it in all the trailers. That might not happen till later episodes, like Hulk will eventually create the special comic book suit and give it to her towards the later episodes. You also see her wearing that when she goes up against Daredevil. This is just Hulk fixing his broken lab equipment, apparently with a whole bunch of duct tape. They continue the joke about her Captain America theory with a huge hand-drawn chartboard like she's gone full Charlie Day meme. The women on the board here, obviously, Peggy Carter. The woman from the USO tour, who we find out at the end of the episode is the woman he actually lost his virginity to. The other woman up on the right here is Sharon Carter, and the question mark, I think, is meant to be the other version of Peggy Carter that he went back to time traveling at the end of Avengers Endgame. I believe this dinner here that She-Hulk is having is meant to be a family dinner. This person with the ponytail might be like a brother of hers. It might be like another mystery cousin. She doesn't have any brothers in the comics, so I think it might be like a brand new person they introduced for the series. There's a SHIELD logo on her legal documents for a case. It's probably a reference to episode 2 in the damage control prison that they're keeping Abomination in. They actually reference this prison during the Miss Marvel series. The picture of the dating app is just meant to be a reference to later episodes when she actually tries to have a legit personal life while still being in She-Hulk form, like dating as She-Hulk. It's in all the trailers, like they have all those jokes about the dudes who want them some death by snoo-snoo. If you don't know what that is, it is one of the best jokes ever. Death by crushed pelvis. You will enjoy it so much, but you will definitely die at the end of it. The picture of her lifting weights in the Venice t-shirt is a reference to Venice Beach in Los Angeles, where a lot of bodybuilders hang out and work out on the actual beach. Then this picture of all the cosplayers as the Avengers, Thor, Iron Man, Captain America, Hulk, trying to get pictures with She-Hulk on Hollywood Boulevard in front of Mann's Chinese Theater is actually a thing in real life. Like, you'll find a lot of cosplayers there charging for pictures with them. You may remember Andrew Garfield actually did a joke about that dressed in a Spider-Man cosplay costume when he was on Jimmy Kimmel one day. And her on the court steps is also from the comics. They also turned part of this into the poster for the series. Then they have the post-credit scene joke where they pay off Captain America not actually being a virgin. Like, they finally canonize it, Hulk finally answering the question. When he says 1943, the woman on the USO tour, that's just meant to help you chart the timeline because they want to say that it's before he started his relationship with Peggy Carter, like before they actually became a thing. And they end with her dropping an F-bomb. Pretty rare to see someone drop an F-bomb in a Marvel production. But if you spotted any other Easter eggs or references in the episode that I didn't talk about in the video, just write them below in the comments. I didn't spot any really huge cameos, obviously a lot of big references, and references to the 1970s Incredible Hulk TV series. My full episode 2 video will post next week after they release it. I believe the title is Whose Show Is This? They did release the rest of the episode titles, but some of them are out of order, so I don't know if this is the actual correct order of the episodes. There's a bunch of really cool stuff coming up, so make sure you enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss any of that. I'll name a giveaway winner in my next big Marvel video too. Everyone click here for my new She-Hulk, Daredevil, and World War Hulk trailer video, and click here for my Loki Season 2 first look breakdown. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.